What if years of trauma had taken their toll from childhood, and then seeing friends and colleagues die during service to their country in training accidents as well as suicides? What if your anger, frustrations, and coping mechanisms were tearing apart your life? What if you were given an experience that was the solution to creating a complete change in these destructive behaviors? What if you were given a sense of clarity and instilled with a purpose of helping others through their struggles? Join me as I talk with Matthew Buckley about his career journey as a Navy fighter pilot to the founding of the No Fallen Heroes Foundation. This is Veteran Success Story. Welcome to another episode of Veteran Success Story. This next guest is Matthew Whiz Buckley, a Top Gun graduate and fighter pilot who also is the founder of No Fallen Heroes, which runs psychedelic therapy for veterans suffering from PTSD, TBI, and multiple other issues. We get into it in the episode, but it's fascinating. I mean, some of this stuff out there, cutting edge, and it was great to talk to Whiz about this particular stuff and where No Fallen Heroes has been involved and continues involvement within that space. Just groundbreaking therapies, absolutely wild stuff, and hope for some more on him and his foundation in the future. He's also the CEO of Top Gun Options and Strike Fighter Financial. So I'll put links in the description on this one. But thank you for tuning in for another episode. And without further ado, let's roll it. Today on Veteran Success Story, I'm joined with Whiz Buckley, who has to do with the nonprofit No Fallen Heroes. And you guys deal with a lot of the back end side with the psychedelic research. Do you want to go into a little bit about the nonprofit and what you guys do? And then I want to go into you, but then we'll lead back into that on how you came to this work. I mean, it's great stuff that you're doing out there.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks for having me. The No Fallen Heroes Foundation, we started 3-4 years ago, initially to try and do something to end veteran suicide. I flew the Hornet for the Navy for about 15 years, and in 15 years of flying fighters, I lost 16 buddies. Not one combat loss. Mechanical issues, bad decisions, bad weather, God, but a lot of loss. Had some pretty significant childhood trauma. I was sexually abused as a child, and my middle sister Monica was killed by a drunk driver when she was 19. So just carried a lot of trauma for a long time, and then along the way, I lost 3 F-18 brothers to suicide, including one of my best friends who was a groomsman in my wedding, who I went through flight school with. Just a great human being. So about 4 years ago, I said, you know what, I need to do something about veteran suicide. And God takes care of fools, drunks, and sailors. So I had a pretty good career on Wall Street. So I just kind of took some of my own money and started a foundation trying to end veteran suicide. But, back then I'm like, how do you keep somebody from killing themselves? Do you help them pay the rent, buy a suit, help them write a resume? Just completely clueless. And around that time, a buddy of mine said, hey, there's a group of team guys, Navy SEAL veterans and special warfare dudes that go down to Mexico and they do psychedelic assisted therapy to heal their trauma. And there's a really cool group going in a couple weeks. Would you like to go? And I said, go to Mexico and do drugs with Navy SEALs. That sounds like a great time. Sign me up. But I had, almost no idea what I was getting into. I did, I did my briefing calls. I read the book. I read the manual. Came up with my intentions, did all the prep work, but there is absolutely nothing you can do to completely prepare for this medicine experience. So I flew into San Diego and I met with the guys I was going down there with. I met Marcus Luttrell. If you've read the book Lone Survivor or seen the movie, you know who Marcus is. One of his teammates. another Navy SEAL veteran. And then Jared Taylor, JT, one of the founders of Black Rifle Coffee. And then an NFL veteran. This guy, his name's Robert Gallery. He was an All-American at Iowa. Just got actually into the College Football Hall of Fame. And then he played in the NFL for years. And he was in a bad place when I met this guy in San Diego. And he, you meet, you take a caravan down, like a convoy down to Mexico. Why? Because if you do this in San Diego, you're a felon and they'll throw you in prison. Yeah. If you do it an hour south, it'll save and change your life potentially. But I got in the car with this guy, Robert Gallery, and I was sitting in the back seat next to a dead iceberg. This guy was just a gray, dark, he looked like death. He just needed a coat and a sickle, man. He was bad. And we went down to a place called the Mission Within. And, we can get into details as we go, but let's just say I got 40 years of therapy in 12 to 14 hours. It was one of the most challenging experiences of my life. I've landed on an aircraft carrier in the middle of the Pacific, low on fuel, pitching deck at night. And that was a walk in the park compared to this experience. It was not fun. It was not recreational. But man, that next morning when that sun came up, I wasn't a different human being. I was who I was originally. It totally destroyed so much trauma, reconnected me with my faith, my sister, and just, man, it was, I can't say enough about it, right? And that next morning I said, this is how we're going to end veteran suicide. So I got home and that's where our mission really picked up steam. And I said, this is it. So we give grants to veterans, first responders, and family members to go sit with these medicines. Why first responders? Well, guess what? A lot of folks leave the military and they take off that uniform, but they don't take off the trauma. Yeah. And then they go home and they become a first responder, cop, firefighter, and, kind of doubles their trauma. I had a Marine buddy of mine who did 20 years and then went down to Miami fire rescue. And he's like, man, my Marine trauma is just a complete joke compared to what I saw in Miami fire rescue, what people can do to children or other human beings. So we help veterans, first responders, and then families. My mom, Gold Star wives, Gold Star moms. My wife had to put up with me through some really horrific time. So they deserve to heal too, right? So veterans, first responders, and family members. And I'm very pleased to say that for the initial 2 years of our foundation, I was furious. I had to get on an airliner to fly to Costa Rica, to fly to Mexico. We had to flee this country to heal trauma we serving this one. Yeah. But I'm pleased to report for the past 2 years, thank you to the great states of Oregon and Colorado, we've started conducting healing retreats here in the United States. One of my mission objectives when I started the foundation was to heal our heroes at home. So we've done 4 retreats in Colorado and 2 retreats so far in Oregon. So that's it. That's kind of the executive summary of our foundation and how it started.
Man, well, I mean, so with all of that, 40 years of therapy, and I've heard this across, it's I guess the best way that I've heard it described, because I've had and we were talking off camera about it before, a slight experience of my own, but profoundly life-changing. Why do you think something like that can do that much good, again, respect for the medicine and set and setting, there's a lot more that goes into it. It's not something recreational, as maybe it could be, but definitely not in this instance. And not, we're not at the point, I don't think people respect it as much as that. But why do you think, is that really the reason why it's illegal, you think, in this country? Or is it, I know a lot of this started with the Nixon war on drugs and then amplified by Reagan, but it almost seems as we go along more and more, there's less and less trust in the government, and you have this stuff come out and saying, this is the research, this is, these are the lives that we've changed through this. And I've heard it across, I've had friends of my own that have done this. I've signed up for clinical trials, which didn't work out in the long run yet. But I am still, seeking the medicine down the road. But, why, have you seen anything? And what do you think that like is to come with this? I know they're researching it and the VA has their hands in it, but it's almost like sometimes we take one step forward and two steps back.
Yeah, so you alluded to it that, I'll walk you through a little history and then tell you my personal experiences in Washington. So in the 60s, as you brought up Nixon, we're fighting the yellow man on the other side of the planet for absolutely no reason. Hey man, here's a weapon, go kill somebody on the other side of the planet you've never met before. No, I'm not going to do that. I love that guy. I love everybody. Why do you love everybody? Well, I took this thing over here and I love everybody and I don't like fighting. Okay, well, now that's a felony and you're subversive. Here's your weapon. Now go kill people. So the war on, Nixon doing that, even his chief of staff before he, passed away admitted that. He's like, the weed stuff, we tagged African Americans with it. We put the weed stuff on the African Americans and we put the psychedelics on all the hippies and the anti-war people. It was absolutely 100% political, right? So... I love me some hippies. I love mala beads and drug rugs and all that type of stuff. But, Timothy O'Leary, let's put it in the water, probably a little too far.
Yeah.
This psychedelic revolution being led by vets, Navy SEALs, fighter pilots, maybe mom and pop walking down the street can say, holy crap, Marcus Luttrell or Whiz, Navy fighter pilot. If they're saying these medicines saved and changed their lives, maybe they should be. So one of the main reasons these medicines are legal at the federal level is they can turn warriors into peacemakers. I've seen knuckle dragging, meat eating, Neanderthal, I'll smash your head in with a rock guys turn into absolute peaceniks. Because on the medicine, it will really destroy this meat puppet, man.
Yeah.
At one point during my journey when I experienced, I choose to use the word God, but source, creator, truth, universe, Steve, pick a name. Yeah, as humans, we have to assign a label to something. But when I experienced God and man, I was on my knees crying and begging. I'm like, I am just a piece of shit, man. I'm awful. And he just with a wave and was like, he said, Matthew, I don't make imperfect things. Get up. I'll take all of that. I got it. Now let's go. Let me show you the good you can do. So I realize that we're all the same. And again, let me lead this discussion with this. 5 years ago, Whiz, if I heard me on a podcast talking like this, I would have kicked my own ass. I would give me a wedgie right now and take my lunch money. It's just not even, there's no way in hell. 5 years ago, I could have projected my thoughts forward to today, right? But I see on the medicine, you see the interconnectedness of everything. Yeah. Ain't no countries or flags or this or we are all the same piece of cosmic stardust that exploded and we're here today, man. The whole point of this thing, again, I sound like my own peacenik, is love, man. On the medicine, when you absolutely feel unconditional love, the hate goes away. All of that kind of melts, and you see what we're supposed to be doing or how things should be. But clearly, because of egos and money and power, they're not, right?
Yeah.
So they're illegal because they can turn people into peacemakers. And Uncle Sam, the military-industrial complex, needs killers, right? They're also still illegal because that standard government, right? The government labels things the exact opposite of what they are. The Inflation Reduction Act caused the highest inflation in 40 years. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, made healthcare even less affordable. It's disgusting. So the definition of a Schedule I drug in this country is no therapeutic use and a high risk of addiction. That is a cigarette. That is alcohol. cigarettes and alcohol are by definition Schedule I drugs in this country, period.
Yeah.
Ibogaine, the first medicine I sat with, is anti-addictive. I was a drinker. Fighter pilot culture, drinking. Tonight we drink, tomorrow we die. Man, I've flown that Hornet shit-faced in Key West. I'd be drinking till 2, 3, 4 in the morning on Duval Street and manning up a Hornet a couple hours later. Up to about 8 months, maybe even a year after the Ibogaine, I couldn't even look at alcohol. I couldn't smell alcohol. It made me dry heave. I got physically ill. I would get the shakes if I looked at booze. Now, if I choose to, I can have a glass of wine with my steak or my pasta. But old Whiz, a glass of wine was the bottle, or probably 2 to 3. Out of the 4 guys I went with, I'm the only dude that has an occasional glass of wine. All of them, 4 years later, completely dry. They've just never looked at it. So it's anti-addictive. Ibogaine and some of these medicines are an addiction interrupter.
Yeah.
Porn, caffeine, you name the addiction, you're going to get a break from it, right? And we can talk about integration because it's not a magic pill. When you get home, you're going to have to do work to maintain the new old you, so to speak. So that's one of the, it's illegal. 2.5 years ago, I was in D.C. Congressman who shall remain nameless, it just doesn't matter, but because they're all kind of like this. Behind closed doors, that guy told me, he said, Whiz, I love what you're doing. I'm like, great. He said, but you're going to have a problem with the big pharma and the alcohol and tobacco folks.
Yep.
And I looked at him, I'm like, ain't that your fucking job? What are you talking about? I'm going to have a problem.
Yeah.
So the other reason these are still illegal at the federal level is because of alcohol, tobacco, and big pharma. Marcus was on 15 meds. 5 to wake up, 5 for lunch, 5 to go to bed. In 4 years, he hasn't taken a single medication.
Man.
As you know, there's a revolving door between the VA and big pharma. If you can get an appointment 8 months from now, a year from now to see somebody, what's wrong with you? These things. Here's a prescription. Next. Yep. It's big pharma, bro. There are massive forces align these medicines. And I'm a little bipolar right now. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I run my own financial company. I trade. I teach people how to invest. So the publicly traded psychedelic stocks, right? There are companies out there that are, developing these things. Mm-hmm. I want them to succeed because it's going to make me filthy rich. I don't want them to succeed because it's going to suck. So here's what's going on is a lot of these companies are, if you're Pfizer, Moderna, Eli Lilly, sitting on the 12th floor of your headquarters, counting your cash, smoking your cigar, you're not going to let some little publicly traded psychedelic company come out with a compound that somebody takes once that cures generalized anxiety disorder for the rest of your life. So these big pharma companies are going to swoop in because they're letting all the publicly traded psychedelic companies burn through their cash, right? It takes a lot of money to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 studies, FDA approval. Once the confetti from an approval hits the floor, those companies are going to come in with a size 12 checkbook and go, yeah, you're ours. Either to put it on the shelf or try and, we changed a molecule from psilocybin. It's psilocybin. We patented it, and now it's $20,000, a month type of thing. So it sucks. Big pharma, I guarantee you, is. It's funny because when I go to the psychedelic conferences, there's always kind of a group of they either look like feds or pharma executives, and based on what happened during COVID, they're probably one and the same. So, very long answer to your short question. Why are these medicines illegal? For all of those reasons. Follow the money. But I'm going to tell all the listeners right now, healing is free. God put all of this stuff on this planet for you to heal. Yeah. You don't need a dude in a lab coat and a beaker to heal you. Yeah. You need you. We have a saying, you are the medicine, right? And I'll never forget when I went to sit with the medicine again, I actually sat with Iboga, so Iboga is root bark from Gabon, Africa.
Yep.
Central West Africa. And it's got like 13, 14 alkaloids in it. And in the West, we pull out one of the alkaloids called ibogaine. So that's what I did the first time. But when I sat with the medicine again, I decided to do the actual root bark. And it was an episode of Fear Factor, man. It's sawdust. I mean, they're pouring, like, just go into a workshop and grab some and put it in your mouth and chew on it and try and swallow it. It turns into like a matzo ball or something. But I bring that up because I remember I had a tough middle year of our foundation, because I remember trying to help all these vets and first responders and family members, and it just, I didn't feel like I was succeeding, right? And that's what ended up being one of my issues was my definition of success. But I remember being, and it's funny because my guide told me, she's like, after I told her my experience, the next day she's like, I probably should have briefed you better. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, in my decades of helping people with the medicine, anybody who goes to sit with the medicine again with the intention of helping other people, the medicine's going to show you everything. And I'm like, oh my God, good point. She's like, yeah, what did you expect another, just, I'm like, yeah, kind of. She's like, no. I bring this up because when I experienced God, and it was almost like, what are you doing here? It was a little bit of, it was very loving. It was always very loving. He's like, well, that's what it was like. You kind of got your answer, son. I healed you, and what's wrong? And I said, I'm trying to help all of these people, and I feel like I'm failing. And again, I'll never forget. I'll take these until I meet God for real for the last time, or the first time for real. Is he gently said, Matthew, you can't heal anybody. That's my job.
Yep.
With them. They have to want to heal, buddy. Keep doing what you're doing. Get them to the door. Walk, carry, drag, do everything you're doing. I appreciate it, but man, that's my job. And I appreciate the efforts. And that I was healed. I was healed again, right? I was healed initially, but then after just trying to help so many people, and oh man, I suck. I feel so much better because you are the medicine, right?
Yeah.
And if I don't get it out of the way later, let me get it out of the way now. This ain't for everyone.
No.
Period. Let's sit up straight and listen to me. There are so many different healing modalities. You and I talked about a couple off the air. You can, I found hot yoga like 5 years ago. If I saw me wearing Lululemon doing a downward dog, I would have kicked my own ass. But I found hot yoga, and that helped. I'm like, wow, I feel a little bit better. Then the yoga instructor's like, well, you meditate, right? I'm like, I can't sit still for 30 seconds. What are you talking about? 20 minutes. Found meditation. So yoga, meditation, I'm like, okay. And then the medicine found me. So That was a good progression. Hot yoga and meditation, man, are two things I would strongly recommend you practice. It'll help you if you do a medicine experience. But walking on the beach, climbing a mountain in Nepal, breath work, holotropic breath work. There are so many different healing modalities, but I like to tell people radical trauma might need radical healing. And these medicines are absolutely radical healing. And there's a couple sentences, again, old me would laugh at, new me absolutely believes them. The medicine calls to you. If you're listening to us talk about this and you're like, it's not calling you. If you're listening to this and you're like, it is. And it's very black and white. Trust me, there ain't no gray, because there are people who are like, oh my God, druggies and all this stuff. That's.
I'll probably get a few like that. What is this episode all about? Are you kidding me? And it's like, no, this is something real, and with what you're saying with the different modalities of healing and meditation and stuff, I just one of the things that comes to mind that as you were talking about that, and I wanted to say it was Jay Shetty, someone who was he was a monk, and I want to say almost, because something in the back of my head is saying it wasn't him, but it was his experience with monks, and they, you know, it was like a year long, you know, sit, meditate and meditate and meditate and meditate. And, but then they brought him to a cave to where they would sit and, you know, it's sensory deprivation, pitch black and everything else. And he got to the point to where he normally, it would take him an hour to get to, and it was like 5 minutes and he was instantly there. And he was like, you know, once he came out of it and stuff and he met back with his teacher, he was like, why didn't you show me this before? And he was like, because you wouldn't understand. Amen. You know, and it's just those points. It's, you get what you need. You know, everything comes in the time that is needed.
When it's supposed to.
It's, yeah. You know, and I didn't understand a lot of that before. And it was just like, you have that mindset of, why is this happening to me? And then you start realizing, oh, what am I supposed to be learning right now? What is the universe telling me? So it's,
we, you know, there was a beautiful moment. Because like I said, we, you know, at the No Fallen Heroes Foundation, we treat a medicine experience as a combat hop. You get a manual, you get a couple briefs, you go into the medicine with 5 intentions for the medicine, right? And then also 5 questions, right? So they're saying, hey man, I'll meet you here and let's go try this stuff. And as a fighter pilot, I'm and an options trader, I'm an analytical dude. I need a manual, I need a checklist, I need knowledge.
Yeah.
So we're deadly serious about this. But to your point, I don't know if it was towards the end of where it was in my experience, because there is no time. That's a separate conversation. But anyway, I remember God just kind of going like, "Hey man, you good? You know, almost time to go home," type of thing. It might not have been like that, but I remember going, "Yeah, I everything I came in here for or to get answered, you answered." And then I caught myself. I'm like, whoa, hold on. I forgot, God. You know, why Monica? Why my sister? And why so young? It just, you know, and God just very gently said, I know. Trust me. And I was healed. Decades of trauma with those simple words. And it was a feeling. We never had a conversation. It was all energy. It was just, you know, God doesn't need to speak. God is. And it was so incredible. Yeah. He just said, I know. And I was like, done. I got it. It was just so incredibly powerful. But it is, you know, like we alluded to earlier, this ain't recreational, man. You ain't taking ibogaine and going out in a club. You're not taking ibogaine and going anywhere for a weekend, right? Yeah. This, you know, first of all, ibogaine has the potential to lower heart rate and cause an issue in between the beats. I forget the exact thing. So at the clinics in Mexico, you do an EKG. You're hooked up to a monitor throughout the night. There's 2 nurses holding space. There's a cardiologist that sleeps downstairs overnight, you know, just on site, just in case. So it is, you know, it's a pretty serious experience. And man, I laid there like doing a one-man luge for, you know, 11 hours. And I think one of the biggest decisions I made in my life was trying to roll on my side at one point. And I think it took me like an hour to go 1 degree to like get on my side. So it's incredibly intense. Some people purge. I remember throughout the night, some of the other guys, man, they sounded like they were in it. I mean, I'm like, and I remember lying there, I'm like, I got to help these guys. You know, I'm an aviator and they're ground guys. I'm like, I got to help these guys. And I remember God just gently, like almost moving my head. He's like, Matthew, they're getting exactly what they need. I got to work with you, man. And I'm like, no, God, come on. You know, listen to Marcus. He's getting his ass kicked. He's like, again, it was always loving and gentle. He said, they're getting exactly what they need. Let's go. I'm like, okay, I'll trust you. And the next morning, everybody, and it's so cool. They take before and after pictures because, you know, before we all look like a bunch of criminals, and after, literally in 2-3 days, your eyes are lighter. My eyes were like this blue color. I mean, everybody looks lighter, right? But down at breakfast the next morning, I looked at those guys and I'm like, you good? And they're like, never better. I said, sounded like you were killing some demons last night. And they're like, yeah, we did. And they're gone, right? So absolutely incredible. And then that next morning, I remember, I'm like a kid on Christmas morning, ran downstairs. I'm like, hey, everything's great. And I remember my guide being very gentle. She said, Matthew, 5% is here. 5% is the medicine. 95% is the integration, what you do with it when you get home.
Yeah.
And I think she was wrong. I think it's 1 and 99. I mean, like 1% the medicine and 99 when we get home. Like you and I talked about a little beforehand. If you don't integrate,
Yep.
if you don't put in the work, it was just an experience. And it could be an experience it ends up being bad. Now, knock on wood, I think, we're doing our annual report right now. I forget the final numbers. We might be close to 100 that we've helped so far, trying to get to that century mark. Knock on wood, we haven't had a single person come home and say, what the absolute waste of time, I'm worse, whatever. We've had people come home and it's been a challenge, but that's the work you have to put in. Let me give you a personal example. I got home and my wife gave me like a week, to kind of hang out and decompress. But, I remember taking her to the beach and giving like a 6-hour debrief. And just the look on our face throughout this talk was like, what the hell? Who is this, right? And I can break up my integration into 30, 60, 90. The first 30 days, they call it the pink cloud phase. I'm in the yard. My wife's like, why are you hugging that tree?
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Cloud
look
nine.
at this thing. It's just, absolutely beautiful. The 30 to 60 was tough because after that 30 days of like, man, look at how perfect everything is. Next month, you're like, holy shit. Why is that guy homeless on the exit ramp? I'm him. There, but for the grace of God, I'm that guy. Why isn't it? I got to help, And then at home too, I got home and I'm looking at my beautiful bride. I'm like, get up, let's go. Life is great. And she's looking at me like, yay for you. I've had to put up, things of, help. And then the last, 60 to 90, I found my cruise altitude. But a couple months after I came home, my wife said, you know what? The medicine's calling to me. So she also went down to the mission within. I think she went with a Gold Star wife and some team wives, and she did amazing. They did psilocybin and 5-MeO DMT, and she got home, and man, we've never been better parents, better humans, or a better couple. I mean, everybody still has their ups and downs, but our downs are not even. It's a completely different world than it was before. But that brings me to a big point. There are some people that we help sometimes, like, I don't want my wife to know her husband to know. I'm like, no, you can't. This is, and that's its own issue that we can work through and we help people with. But man, you have got to have a support system at home because you're going to go through literally a transformational experience. And it's like me getting home from cruise. I remember when I got home from deployment, the wife and the kid, everybody's got their own routine and schedule. And here you come barging in the front door like, Daddy's home. And, and let me throw a hand grenade in the middle of all of this. So you definitely need a support system at home. And we have a whole guide, to holding space and for, loved ones and significant others to get them up to speed. Because when I went through 4 years ago, that didn't exist. Susie was like, what the hell happened to you? And there's also a little bit of worry, right? And she didn't share this with me, obviously, before I left. But after she got home and things were great, she's like, I got to be honest with you. I was terrified. Not necessarily, a little worried physically, is he going to go nuts type of thing?
But too, like who's coming back or, you're out there facing this unknown. We do live in the information age where there's so much out there, but at the same time, there's a lot of stigma and, who didn't grow up, I know I did. I was born in the 80s, and it was, who wasn't, we had those, the drug commercials, this is your brain on drugs. And it was just all these scare tactics and psyops out there. And now that more's coming out, but it's still an unknown thing. You don't know what you're going to face. And it might be an experience for you, but at the same time, you're going into the unknown.
Yeah. And you know, and she was that was a worry, but she was more worried that I wasn't going to love her. Like somehow the medicine was going to whatever. She's like, oh my God, I thought you were going to be this different person. Realize that, I you know, whatever. I'm like, oh my God, you were worried about that? The medicine brought me even closer to you to realize how horrible I've been and how much I love you. And you are literally my soulmate. I mean, I saw both of our souls ascend together. I'm not telling her all this stuff. She's like, oh my God, that's great. And it's funny because after doing the medicine, and then she went months later, I had the same experience. I was terrified. I'm like, oh my God, what if she's right? What if she goes and does the medicine and realizes what a piece of shit I've been? You know, the medicine heals her and she goes, wow, what a complete waste of time I've been with you. Didn't happen. It actually, you know, I think because there's a couple other, you know, sister foundations that do medicine work. I think anecdotally, I've heard one out of the thousands and thousands that have done this, like one couple who did this and they ended up getting divorced. But that's exactly what was supposed to happen because now they're best friends. They're like, oh my God, we were an awful married couple. We're the best friends ever. So that's the worst case scenario I've ever heard. And that's the best case scenario, right? Because I heard that story years ago. They're like, nope, nothing's really ever happened like that except this one couple, and they'll be the first ones to tell you it was the best thing ever. So yeah, but yeah, you know, the support system at home is definitely needed. And like I said, we give grants to family members to go sit with the medicine too. So, and I went obviously solo the first time, then Susie went, and then we did a retreat together. I'd recommend doing it solo. Even when Susie and I went together, we went to Costa Rica for Iboga. Yep. You know, they put us on the other end of the temple, the spiritual center, because you got to have your own experience. If you're like right next to your wife, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, is she okay? Is everything great? No. You got to, so they do a good job of saying, all right, you're here for you, but it's nice that you're both here type of thing. So if you are considering it, don't do it as a couple initially. Go get your shit together. I tell people, you know, when you get on an airliner, one of the first things the flight attendant says to you is what? If we lose pressurization, put the mask on yourself first. You ain't good to anybody else if you pass out, and you got to put the mask on yourself first. So that's what I tell people. If this is calling to you, put the mask on yourself first. Become a better version of you, and that's going to help everybody else around you. Because, you know, as you know, man, in the military, we're always taught to think about your brother, your sister, you know, service above self and give. Ain't nothing wrong in this case with being selfish, because it's not. If you're not good, nobody else is good. Your wife, your kids.
It's the same thing in a combat situation. You know, I mean, it's you can't help that person who just went down because they were hit, unless, you know, you have to take care of the threat. You have to get to cover first, you know, and God forbid, pull them to it, you know, whatever. But your first priority is you know, and then them, then the shift happens. So, I mean, it's the exact same. I get it. And that's good that you guys put together these guides and stuff like that. I mean, like you just said, this stuff didn't exist. So in thinking about that in the family setting, in a household setting, you know, and putting those details matter. So good on you guys for putting that together. I'll have to make sure, you know, I mean, that this stuff makes it into the links. You know, I'm working on a full web hub now on putting everything together to where everyone's going to have access to this stuff. Hey, you know, you want to learn about this end of things, plant medicines and whatnot, right? This is where to go here. And then these are the episodes where these different people talk about it. So we'll have to make sure.
Remind me a great resource you're going to need for that. It's called you maybe even Google it, a guide to psychedelic medicine for veterans.
Perfect.
It's on psychedelics.com, but if you Google that, it should come up as obviously the first link. A guide to psychedelic medicine for veterans. It's written for morons like us that can meat and potatoes, goes through each medicine and all that type of stuff. That's the first resource I send to anybody who reaches out to me. So make sure you throw that in there too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's, I mean, as military, we do so good if someone puts a framework in front of us. You know, if there's the steps, we will follow those steps.
Correct. Give me a
You know,
checklist,
just,
man. I'm an
yep,
aviator. Yeah.
same deal. Yeah, PCCs and PCIs for me. Just pre-mission checks.
Correct. Yeah.
So the difference, like, you know, you said your wife went down for psilocybin and a DMT trip. Do you want to just go through? I know before we kind of focused on ibogaine and addictive stuff, and I know a few people. I know one right now who's struggling with a heroin issue that was actually induced when they came back and they were in oh my God, what am I thinking? Walter Reed. You know, and they were in Walter Reed and they got your standard VA prescription of, hey, here's your stuff for pain. And it started with oxys and then it just whoom, ramped up. And all of a sudden, you know, he finds himself shooting up heroin. And this has happened to a few guys, you know, just seeking and out different things that really aren't truly helping them to where these medicines, you know, a one hit of ibogaine and then there you go, there's your addiction problem gone. Do you want to go through some of the
and that's just, yeah, that, and it's incredible, right? They did a study on heroin addicts. I mean, heroin addicts.
Yeah.
85% of the heroin addicts who sat with ibogaine once, never even looked at it, thought about it again for up to 3. They ended the study after 3 years. So like, if you go back to heroin after 3 years of not doing it, you know, something, it ain't the ibogaine, right?
Yeah.
So it cured 85% of the heroin addicts that day, meaning that next morning they ate breakfast. They weren't shaking or the sweats. And that's the worst part about getting off that heroin addiction is that stuff. That's why they go back. Wow. Your body, it's a system reset. We helped a Navy SEAL who was a breacher, right? The guy at the door with the explosions. Yep. His brain scans from the VA were dark and black and gray. 3 months after ibogaine, they were white. Wow. The neurogenesis, the neuroplasticity of ibogaine is insane. It'll regrow dead neural pathways and create new ones. Wow. You know, I tell people, you know, I told you I'm a trader and I do all sorts of other stuff. I didn't do the medicine for any of that. But man, when I came home, I was like Neo in the Matrix. It's like God just scrubbed everything. Everything was brighter, cleaner, and things, literally I was Neo in the Matrix. I'm like, wow. It was insanity. So the neuroplasticity of these medicines is incredible. Google ibogaine and Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. All of these brain issues are being studied with ibogaine to help these people. And the results have been incredible. You know, we mentioned, you know, Governor Perry on Rogan and some of these studies. Could you imagine? And again, if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. And except in this case, this really does appear to be some sort of, you know, and if you do research on iboga and the history of it, some believe it's the tree of knowledge. I mean, that's a whole separate conversation, and that's what's funny is a lot of the religious types or anti-drug types. I'm like, folks, psychedelics predate Christianity, right? Mm-hmm. You know, there's an incredible book called The Immortality Key by Brian Murescu, he went to Greece, and the mysteries of Eleusis. It was psychedelics. I mean, on the gate walking in there, it says, if you die before you die, you'll never die. Meaning and it's funny because I still fly and stuff like that. You never want to hear a pilot talk like this. I have no fear of death. Now, let me clean that up. I want to get old and see my grandkids and yell at them to get off the yard. So I don't want to go anywhere anytime soon, but I have zero fear of death. I've already seen what's on the other side, and it's pretty damn cool, man. So it's just the anti-drug because, you know, I'll get attacked by people sometimes. That was not God, and that was not sister. That was a demon. I'm like, okay, that's a pretty good demon, man, to mimic God, to mimic my sister, who made me sober, who cured everything, and makes me believe in God more and want to tell more people. That's a demon, right?
Yeah, lot of that comes from ignorance. You know, I mean, it's just ignorance, fear, and I mean, not to even mention that, you go back, and I don't know exactly when this was, but I do know I've looked at some of the stuff with this, but Christianity used to thrive off of psychedelics. I mean, they were integrating it into church services. What do you think that smoking ball of incense was going through?
Drink my blood and eat my body, man. Soma wine.
Hello. Yeah.
And, I don't even want to cause a huge, look into Dionysus and some of the Greek stuff that Christianity conveniently copied and pasted.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, there's a lot. But the gift of psychedelics, I've never been more spiritual in my life. I have ditched religion. I was a recovering Catholic, man. I was one of 6 kids, South Jersey, South Philadelphia, Catholic grade school, all boys Catholic high school. Thanks, Mom and Dad. I mean, it didn't get any more Catholic than we made the Pope look Jewish. Then what happened to me as a kid and my sister getting killed, I'm like, done. What kind of God does this? Right. Yeah. But psychedelics reconnected me with God, period. And it also taught me that I don't need to go to a building once a week with a dude with a funny hat who wants 10% of my money to hear God through him.
Yeah.
Like it's so funny because, again, growing up Catholic, reading the Bible and all sorts of stuff like that, I have discovered the Nag Hammadi text, right? Or the Gospel of Thomas, where, Jesus is like the kingdom of heaven is within you. Yeah. It ain't somewhere else. What do you think you have to go to heaven? It's right here, man. And that meditation, when I can, and it's a meditation practice, right? It's not a meditation execution. Yep. Some of them suck, some of them are orgasmic. But, when I get to that meditative state where no thought, no nothing, it's just absolutely perfection. It's funny because, and I forgot to bring this up earlier, it answered a question that's been burning since my sister died. Is she bored? Right? Are people bored in heaven? Like after you die, are you sitting up there on a cloud, looking at your watch going, where's everybody? No. When I was in the medicine, it was infinite. It was infinity, and it was only now. Mm-hmm. There was only this moment. There was no future. There was no past. So it answered that question. They're not bored. They are in this perfect state of grace. We didn't talk about my 5-MeO DMT experience when I was 52. I think in my 52 years on the planet, I probably tried to do a backflip or a flip into the pool maybe twice as a kid. And I think both times I ended up on my back. As a 52-year-old male, I flipped in the bed in Mexico. I did a front flip with my 5-MeO DMT experience. It was one of the most violent and peaceful moments of my life. Let me talk through that real quick. So Ibogaine, 12 to 14 hours, they sold this to me as 5-MeO DMT, 10, 15-minute experience. It's the icing on the cake. I'm like, shit, that sounds great. I got my ass kicked for 12 to 14 hours. I'll take some icing on the cake. No, that's not what I got. So the next day is a gray day. We went to the beach. You laugh, you cry, you share what you saw, you eat, you sleep, But that Sunday morning, they separate us. Marcus went first. He was all the way up at the top floor of this beautiful home. It's right out of Central Casting. It's overlooks the Pacific on the beach in Mexico, and it's huge. So they do the toad all the way up in the room that you did the Ibogaine in. When we did Ibogaine, there's 5. It's so funny. We got in the room for the first time. Marcus is like, hey, man, why the mattresses on the floor? Well, there's a reason. So there's 5 mattresses on the floor, right? And then for the toad, Bufo Day, there's only 1. And there's a lot of pillows around it. And I'm like, well, that's odd. So they clean the entire room out instead of 1 mattress, pillows, and it's, looking out this window over the Pacific. Well, that's because of me. So Marcus goes first. We're all down like 4 stories below. And now I know why they separate you, because of me, right? So Marcus goes, I don't hear anything. Then they come and get me. I go all the way upstairs and, sitting down on the bed, my legs crossed, and they put the, eye mask up on your forehead. They give you another quick brief. They gave you a brief already, but another rebrief. Inhale, and you take in the toad and blah, blah, blah. So, man, I inhale the toad, and, like, hold it and, count down from 10, 9. And as you're doing that, they kind of slide the eye shades down and they gently lower you to the bed. Well, when I went to lower it to the bed, there was no bed. And in the blink of an eye, I went from 0 to infinity like that. It was literal. It was white. It was Millennium Falcon, man. It was a jump to hyperspace.
Yep.
And it was perfect. It was. I'm searching for a better word than this, but talking to veterans, it works perfectly. It was take an orgasm and make it infinite. It doesn't even, and it was that. It was absolute perfection. That's why I say I have no problems when I die, man, because I know exactly what's going to happen. And my guide at dinner, I was the topic of conversation because all these things happen. And she's like, I've been doing this for decades. You're the first time I've seen this in person. I said, what? Oh, great. She said, you transcended. She said, you were in a V on the bed. You were in a V-shaped, and your arms and legs were moving in perfect symmetry. I'm like, what? That did not happen. And the doctor and the guide who were holding space too, they're like, I'm like, I couldn't do that if you paid me. She's like, you transcended. I've read about it in all the books and the videos. I've never seen it. You transcended. You were in a perfect state of grace. Like, oh my God. So obviously I don't remember doing that. But I do remember being with God and God saying, do you get it? This is it. Everything's fine. Everything's okay. No need to stress. No need, all sorts of stuff. I'm like, I got it. And then it was kind of like, well, clearly you can't stay here, but, you good? I'm like, wow, I'm good. I had to get back into this thing. And this thing is imperfect.
Yep.
Oh, and before I forget, let me remind you, I have horrific tinnitus. It's horrible. And this, talking to you right now, it's a loud squeal for the rest of my life. Decades of jet noise. I have horrible tinnitus. My back's killing me from pulling G's. Eyesight in my right eye's going. It was perfect. Everything was healed. Everything was healed. And my guide reminded me the night, at dinner, she's like, you're in the presence of Source. Of course you're going to be, everything's perfect. Jesus would heal with his touch. You're with God, man. Ain't nothing wrong with you. I'm like, wow. But anyway, I remember trying to come back into this imperfect vessel. And there was still some shame. There was dark. There was still there was crap. Booze.
And it was visible to you.
Yeah. And it felt, it wasn't necessarily just visible. It was a feeling like as I came from perfection and being with God to this thing, man, still not a perfect meat puppet. And as I tried to get into this thing, I wasn't fitting. I do remember this part. They didn't have to debrief me. I remember taking a deep breath and I just yelled at the top. I've never yelled that loud in my life. And everything I'm going to tell you from here on out, I don't remember. This was what was told to me. She's like, after you transcended, you got into the fetal position, into this tight little ball. And she said, you yelled at the top of your lungs. I'm like, yeah, I think I remember that one. But it still wasn't all gone. So they're like, you took the biggest breath we've ever heard in our lives and you yelled even louder and longer. And before we even knew it, you flipped. You went from this ball on the bed to a flip. And I'm like, there's no way any of this happened. It's just physically impossible. And they're like, nope. And here's the funny part is I remember hearing a deep breath and I'm like, well, that wasn't me. And then I heard it again and I'm like, okay, well, maybe I should do that. And I did take a deep breath and I opened up my eyes and there's 3 people around this mattress with tears in their eyes, looking like they've seen a ghost. I mean, they just look terrified, and I am perfect. I look at them, I'm like, are you guys okay? And they're like, are you okay? I'm like, I've never been better in my life. And they're like, okay, good. But man, and they told me this later at dinner. They're like, do you remember some of the things you were saying when you came out of the medicine? I'm like, clearly not. They're like, you just looked at us and you said freedom. You said free, I'm free. And then you said, I can't wait to tell Susie I love her forever because I finally know what forever is. So that's my Valentine's present to her every year. I'm like, remember when I said that out of the medicine? So I got to get out of jail free card. But I remember feeling it. I'm like, oh my God, I know when somebody says I love you forever, I got it. I felt it. I felt forever. I felt infinity. But here's the funny part. So that was, it might have been 10 to 15 minute experience. It was forever in the medicine. There was no time. I didn't know it was 15 minutes, man. It was infinite. It was infinite.
Yeah.
But here's the funny part. So I'm crying, happy tears. I've never cried happy tears in my life. I was a waterwork, and you fast because they don't want you, in case you purge. So there's a nice bowl of fruit. And I'm like, it was the best fruit I've ever had in my life. But it's funny because JT and then Marcus's teammate snuck up from the bottom floor to right below where I did the medicine. All they heard was me screaming bloody murder and then a ruckus, the flip. They're like, so when I came down the stairs with my guide, they reminded us, like, don't talk to anybody, just go outside. And, so when I came down the stairs and they're sitting on the couch, these 2 guys are looking at me like, what the fuck? They looked terrified. And I remember looking at them going, like, 2 thumbs up, like, hey. And they're looking at me like they're totally confused. I'm like, that's a weird look. She's like, no, let's just go outside. I'm like, okay. She came back in to go upstairs and get ready for one of them. And they're like, what the hell's going on? What was this screaming? And she's like, it was a happy scream. It sounded like you were cutting his calves with a hacksaw. She's like, no, it's all good. So we had a blast at dinner that night. Them telling me this, like, we hear bloody murder, a ruckus, and you come down the stairs with this shit-eating grin on your face. So that's why they try and keep people apart from that ceremony because, and I've held space for guys and gals that have done Toad. I've seen nothing. I've seen whimpers. I've seen laughter. I've seen tears of joy. I've seen a guy stand up and think he's got a bolt of, life and infinity coming out and he shoots it around the room. I mean, I've seen everything. And that's why sometimes I hesitate to tell people, the details of a particular experience.
Yeah.
There is no way on God's green earth that anybody will have a similar experience. The medicine gives you exactly what you need, and it doesn't necessarily give you what you want. You're going to get what you need. So it's just interesting to relate some of my stories because the random times I've gone to sit with the medicine again, which is interesting because I actually need less and less. You are the medicine. The more medicine work I do, I don't even need any, right? But each time, completely different experience. Because, at the end of the day, there's always more layers. Marcus and the guys want to do an annual knock the rust off of it. I missed 1 or I missed 2 because we were doing our own retreat. So a couple of the guys went, got the band back together and they did it as a team. But that's the gift of the medicine because old Whiz, if I started to get in it, I was in it and I'd spiral and bad shit would happen. Now, if I get in it, I go, you know what? I can go knock the rust off. If I got some ice building up on my wings, I'm not going to stall. I know I can go knock the rust off. And to all those sitting there going, well, this can be one and done, right? I've heard that. Yeah, it can. We've helped a ton of people that are one and done and never even have looked back on it. There are other people, me, who will go maybe knock the rust off. And I think me knocking the rust off is also because this ain't easy. Will, every time I was about to say I don't want to wake up in the morning. That's a bad thing to say. When I wake up in the morning, man, I get an email or an alert every time somebody fills out a grant request. And bro, I haven't read a single grant request that doesn't bring tears to my eyes. That doesn't make me, these people need help.
Yeah. And it's sad that it's not coming through the channels too that were built in to help. And instead, through a lot of those channels, it's traditional, or stuff that's been written by pharma, and it's not,
Amen.
It's not pure. It's not something that I've looked a lot into the fact that, Native Americans and stuff and their traditions in the sweat lodge and peyote and, a lot of what we did and what we saw overseas, and then looking at what the Native Americans would do and how there was a period of readjustment and where they would tell stories around and they would go to the sweat lodge. And there was a process in which, you have to look at the warfare back then. You're talking about extreme, brutal, hand-to-hand, close-quarters stuff. And I mean, it leaves a mark on you.
Correct.
For them to have this tradition and this way that they would reintegrate into society after and completely ignore that, and have that pompous attitude of, we know better, we have labs and doctors and they've studied forever, but completely, just discount this other stuff without even looking at it. I kind of feel that we're in the age of information and the fact that there's a lot of veterans now standing up and saying, hey, look, like this works, and we've never had more information available to us than we do now. And this is great that you're doing this type of stuff out there and that you're actually being part of the change, being the someone who's that force multiplier for change. And it's awesome to hear, man. It really is.
I appreciate that. Well, I call it the world's greatest Ponzi scheme. What do I mean by that? You go and heal and you're like, oh my God, I got to tell my friends, this is the best Ponzi scheme on the planet. I appreciate the kind words, but after you heal, you can't not want to help other people. Because you get home and you see the suffering, or you see your bros or your sisters. You're like, holy shit, man, let me try and help. So it really, the medicine wants to spread this healing. Our natural default state is supposed to be love and empathy and compassion, man. It ain't supposed to be. I tell people, this is hell. This is purgatory. War, poverty, hate, racism, crime. This is the shit show, man. What I experienced was heaven, for lack of a better word. Yeah. And again, the people who, demons or whatever, I'm like, the God that I experienced, and I am no way sitting here with flowing robes and telling you that I know what God is. God meets, in my opinion, meets all of us where we are. To me, I was beaten literally as a Catholic child that God's a white dude on a cloud and a throne with a white beard and flowing robes and shoots lightning bolts out of his fingers. If you miss mass on Sunday, Matthew, you will burn in hell forever.
Yeah.
Who tells a kid that, man? Right? That was not the God, that I experienced. So that, there's a lot of this power stuff. But after my experience, I don't think the God that I experienced isn't bored. The dude didn't make a reverse him. You know what? I'm going to make an anti-me. And I'm going to test these souls that I created that are a part of me. I'm going to test them. And if they fail, they're going to burn for infinity. I mean, it's not even. Yeah. So when I tell some of the religious types that.
It's taking a deity and then putting human characteristics to it, either so that people can understand it. I don't prescribe to religion either. I grew up in a very, I tell people, a religious militant, or a militant religious household. And it was really, just very heavy Pentecostal, evangelistic type, fear-based. And the more and more that I look at it, I'm just like, how in the, I don't know if it's just people following people kind of thing. But it just doesn't make sense to me, and I'm very spiritual in that side. So,
well, it's all about control, right? I mean, before organized religion, you could commune with the creator one-on-one, man, until some dude came along and said, no. What you're taking to commune is now illegal. It talks to me, and I'll tell you what the message is. And by the way, pay me 10%. And then they make the devil. if you don't listen to the things I'm telling you to do, this will happen. It's always about control, and it's always about money. That's why the churches, have tried to stomp out the psychedelics throughout the past. It's because they realize that if you realize you don't need them in between you and God, they're out of business. And I'll bring that up every once in a while, the Nag Hammadi text or the Gospel of Thomas, and like, those are heretical texts. I'm like, do you realize how many years after Jesus died that Bible was written? Could you imagine getting the UN, a group of all those, people to try writing the Bible today at the UN and getting shit in or out? Well, the Israelis are genocide. What?
Good luck.
It would be obscene. So when people tell me that ancient texts are like heretical, I'm like, who labeled them that, man?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who was it that was pompous enough to pick and choose and say that those were the scripts that God wanted to be portrayed to the rest of people? And if you've ever actually seen the Dead Sea Scrolls as well, and I have.
Correct.
And it's like, how do you extrapolate from that what you have in front of you? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I don't mean to offend anybody who's full Bible beater. Every word on the page is great. I love you just as much as that's awesome and that's great. But I'm reminded, and I always get the saint wrong, either Saint Francis of Hippo or Assisi. I'll whiz the quote, so to speak. If you think you understand God, that ain't God. It's a lot more flowing, but it's essentially like the thing that I experienced. I try and sometimes lying in bed at night, go back to what I experienced, and it'll make me almost cry or be fearful. And here's what I mean. When God, the first half of the Ibogaine was a tour, and it's so cool that just about every person I've talked to that has sat with Ibogaine, it's broken up into, I don't know if it's half, but let's just say half. The first half is a tour. When I got home, I looked at Susie. I'm like, I don't have to travel ever again in my life. She's like, why? I said, I've seen everything. Yeah. I mean, whatever word you want to choose. Again, I'll use the word God showed me everything. And it was kind of like, dude, can I cook or what? Look at this. And you are a part of, you are as an integral, I made you as special as the mountains, the sea, you, man. So this tour, after the tour ended, the tour guide dropped me off in space. I don't mean like scary space. I mean just beauty, the beauty of the universe. And then, man, there it was. The brightest, whitest light that was emanating love and energy, And of course, I'm a political science major from South Jersey. I'm like, are you God? And it was like, yes. And I just kind of dissolved. It just felt so incredible to get that. And then, of course, me being Whiz, I went back and I said, can you give me a sign, And I'll never forget the visual. Around this, in cursive handwriting, the words sign appeared and went away. Just like that. And I'm like, oh my God. So now that I verified God, right? Like, what's your first car in high school? So he got his MISREP or whatever card, right? I remember going, oh, wow, where have you been? And as we talked about earlier, it was always loving and gentle. He said, I have always been, and I will always be. Where have you been, my son? I'm like, oh, man. But then I said, okay, hold on. You didn't hear me. You didn't hear me, God. What do you mean you've always been? Who made you? Gentle. I have always been, and I will always be. I said, no, I got that. But listen, somebody had to have made you, man. Who made you? God will. He just gently lifted me up, and I exploded into infinity. And I felt what I have always been and I will always be felt like. And then I came back, I'm like, I got it. So I bring that up because when I lie in bed at night, trying to fathom that God has always been kind of hurts me. I get a knot in my chest or my brain because as humans, we have beginnings and we have ends.
Yeah, it doesn't
There
compute.
is no such thing as infinite. So I'm telling you, bro, whenever I try and get back to that moment, it contorts me as a human into It's impossible, but I can promise you it is possible. And the magic of these medicines is to be able to dissolve this, to let you touch that, even for a brief instant, so you can make this time, the world, everything is infinite, and I experienced it. If you think about it, we're not even a grain of sand in the time of the infinite hourglass. So that's why we need to enjoy all of this while we can. This is why when things are going great, enjoy it. It ain't going to last. When things suck, don't worry. It won't suck forever. Because right in the middle it's fine. It's funny because I wrote down in my journal a bunch of times after my first medicine experience, I'm like, everything is okay. It's just, I had that feeling. When my wife got home, she said, I had this overwhelming feeling that everything's fine. I'm like, I know, right? She called it okay, or fine. I called it okay. But that's the feeling. Throughout the highs, great highs, and the horrific lows, everything's fine. And that was one of the gifts. It's so funny. She actually did her podcast episode. It's called It's Fine, It's Always Fine, because it is.
So what are you guys doing? So I know that like you've done a lot of the Costa Rica, Mexico. I know there's a lot more focus, and again, you said that right at the very beginning. It's always been your vision to be helping heroes at home. What are you guys doing stateside, within the US, and where do you see it going? And what are some of the fears too of like kind of the incoming and stuff? Is there anything there?
So the new administration, let me lead with a couple of things. It's I've never been more bullish with the incoming administration. Now, if that offends you, you got problems. I don't care who's in charge, as long as they help heal our heroes, right? So a month and a half ago, I should be happy. I'm torn. Let me map this out. Month and a half ago, the VA.
Yep.
We are announcing a $1.5 million study into psychedelics. First time since the Vietnam War.
Yep.
It infuriated me. Well, why, Whiz? Because they're publicly... Nah, don't give me any of that bullshit. It was to shut people like me up. The federal government spends $6 million a minute. That's 15 seconds of funding. And you ready for this? It's spread out over 5 years.
Yeah.
So forgive me for being jaded. I've been to D.C. I've been in this fight for a while. They did that to keep people like me shut up, or at least to be able to point to it and go, well, see, if you had given the No Fallen Heroes Foundation $1.5 million, I probably could have cleared half of my list. I don't need a 5-year study, VA. I've done a 4-year study, and we are saving. How many veterans are going to die in this 5 years? That you can find $1.5 million in your couch. Yeah. It infuriates me. Okay, now let me come down a little bit. Lance Corporal or whatever he was, J.D. Vance, the first Marine vice president, was on Joe Rogan 4 or 5 months ago. Rogan read him the riot act about psychedelics and veterans. And Vance, to his credit, he's like, dude, I didn't even know this. Thank you. And they got into it. J.D. Vance is like, why wouldn't we be doing this?
Yeah.
And Rogan's like, well, it's a Schedule 1. He's like, well, they had a great conversation. The man is now vice president. Secretary of Defense, I love saying this, Pete Hegseth, was on the Sean Ryan podcast months ago.
Yep.
Sean Ryan, same thing as me, ass kicking with ibogaine and toad. And Pete Hegseth said, I've never experienced these medicines, but all my bros who have done it said it changed their life. Why aren't we doing this?
Yeah.
So we got the SecDef, we got the number 2 vice president, and love him or hate him, RFK Jr. He's going to be the HHS secretary, man, if he gets confirmed. And it's interesting because it's on my Instagram if anybody hasn't seen this clip. There's a 2-3 minute clip that'll bring tears to your eyes because he's asked, what do you think about psychedelics? And RFK Jr. said, hey, I'm a recovering alcoholic. I'm a recovering heroin addict. I thought you're just replacing one bad thing with another. And then my beautiful bride took her life in 2012. And he said, one of my sons was done. He's like, I lost my son that day too. And a buddy of his grabbed him and said, let's go. And they went to Peru, did the medicine, and he came home, and I got my son back. So this guy went from being, I'm a drug addict, alcoholic, to I absolutely support psychedelic healing for veterans. So I've never been more bullish, but we got to see it, right? And I'll tell you, man, when I went to DC, I got it wrong. We're living in bizarro world right now. I thought Democrats were anti-war, mala beads, drug rugs, pro-psychedelic. Wrong. They are in bed with big pharma. They are currently the pro-war party. It could not have been more. And the Republicans, anti-drug, let's kill criminals. When I talk to the most right-leaning Republican pro-law, when I give them my 5 minute, they're like, done. So the parties have completely reversed. We were talking about before we jumped on the air about Rogan and Rick Perry. Rick Perry stole my sentence, man, on the Rogan podcast. He's like, 5 years ago, Governor Perry, I ran for president. I was the energy secretary. If I heard me talk about psychedelics, I'd kick my ass. I'm like, I say that. But, and every Navy SEAL congressman and just about every Republican congressman is pro psychedelics. When Marcus got home, a different healed human being, his brother Morgan, Navy SEAL, when Morgan got home, or Marcus got home, Morgan looked at him and said, holy crap, man, what the hell happened to you? He's like, well, I did this. So Morgan went and sat with the medicine, and he came home completely healed. And guess what? He's now a congressman from Texas. So when you have right word Republicans going, hey man, we need to legalize this, I'm here for it. But you would have thought that the Democrats were there. They're not. Nothing, not a peep under Joe Biden. As a matter of fact, if anything, the FDA declined MDMA approval. Why? If you look at most of the advisory board members that voted thumbs down, they all have ties to Big Pharma. So at the end of the day, man, I've never been more, because I started this mission under a Joe Biden administration, and it was very disheartening. Yeah. But now, I've been to Mar-a-Lago. I know people, a lot of the guys that have sat with the medicine are buddies with Pete Hegseth. I would hope that we see some movement. I'm not super happy with the VA secretary. He's definitely I would have rather have had Pete as the VA secretary if he believes in psychedelics, because the VA guy's a little, he might be a teetotaler and kind of a Bible-beaten psychedelics or the tools of the devil type of guy, but I'll withhold judgment. So very, very long answer to your short question. I'm very bullish on the next 4 years, and if they don't move, I'll be ripping them to shreds like I did the Democrats. I'm not a partisan hack, man, period.
Right. Yeah, I mean, time will tell, So, I mean, within the ones within the U.S., you said Colorado and Washington. Which therapies are you focusing on there? Because I don't think, is Ibogaine something that they can actually do stateside now, or?
So, yeah, it's Oregon. So it's Oregon and Colorado. Mm-hmm. I think New Jersey decrimmed. Massachusetts voters suck. I think they needed 60% to approve. I think it got to 50-something. There are other states moving it. But in Oregon and Colorado, Iboga is legal. But here's the issue, like we talked about earlier, Ibogaine can lower your heart rate. Yep. So the clinics in Mexico have the EKGs, have the doctors. So nobody in Colorado or Oregon yet has put in that infrastructure. It's got to be, they have to have a lot more safeguards than psilocybin.
Yeah.
Psilocybin, you can show up, take 5 grams of the medicine, and it's not going to affect your heart rate. So to sit with Ibogaine in the U.S., it'll take a little bit. My brother Justin Lepre, you want to talk about a bad transition, right? He's a Marine, 2004 Fallujah Marine. 1 week he's kicking down doors, getting shot at, and killing people. Next door, he's homeless on the streets of New York City. But my brother Justin Lepre started a place in Austin, Texas called the Illuminating Company. It was called Heroic Path to Light, but he changed the name. I think it's the Illuminating Company or the Illuminating Hearts. I bring that up because he's planning for April to be the first ibogaine retreat in the U.S. After he was homeless on the streets of New York City, went to Wall Street, which is a funny story, and then he was a firefighter in Austin. So he's actually got some doctor buddies in Austin that are he's building the infrastructure for ibogaine, and I think we're gonna send some folks to him in Texas. But I hate talking like this, but as a guy who runs a foundation, I have to. It's not cheap. So ibogaine, we budget $6,500 for an ibogaine retreat per vet.
Wow.
I think in Oregon and Colorado, our retreats are anywhere per person about $2,000 to $2,500. So sadly, and again, I hate talking like this, but I can do 3 vets for the price of 1 with ibogaine to potentially receive the same-ish healing. Yeah. Ibogaine definitely a lot more to the addiction side, a lot more towards the traumatic brain injury side.
Yep.
But I don't, when it comes to our vets, it's a buffet. I don't steer anybody to any medicine. The medicine will call to you, whichever one. So you do your research, you listen to the podcast, you read the guides, you figure out what medicine calls to you. I don't like just saying, hey, we have an ibogaine retreat coming up, you're going to this one. I will never be directed. I'm glad that happened to me. I'm glad God just kind of said, 2 weeks from now, dude, you're going down to Mexico. That worked perfectly for me. But yeah, I think along the way, I also, got some lessons learned to be able to change things and figure stuff out. So,
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So you're, so what was it, psilocybin and MDMA as your main focus, U.S. stateside?
Ibogaine, Iboga, and then psilocybin. Yeah, we don't do MDMA at all.
Okay.
MDMA. So I sat with Rick Doblin. Rick and I were, in D.C. talking to lawmakers together. We walked the halls of Congress, and I'll never forget in Congresswoman Kay Granger's office with the chief of staff. I gave my ibogaine story, and Rick gave the MDMA pitch, and the guy looked at us. He said, "Why aren't you leading with the ibogaine stuff? That sounds..." And, Rick's like, well, you guys, the federal government made MDMA illegal in 85, and we kind of have more current, we'll get to ibogaine. I remember sitting there going, I wouldn't be leading with MDMA. It's got club history. It's got, it's made in a lab coat by a dude with a beaker. There is zero stigma associated with ibogaine. When I tell somebody I got my ass kicked for 14 hours, it's not MDMA, right? So, I think God let that happen. So MDMA got punched around a little bit. So all the other efforts are like, whoa, we're going to tighten up this. We're going to tighten up that. That ain't going to happen to us. So yeah.
I can see where that stigma, and I know that there is a kind of a fracture in that community and stuff having to do with, I know Terrence McKenna was a big proponent of the more natural stuff, to where it's like, hey, if it's in a lab, XYZ, let's get this stuff through nature first, before even, it wasn't demonized, but it was more like, hey, like, we don't even understand this. So like, let's go this route first. It grows out of the ground. It doesn't cost anybody anything, which is very opposite about, what we're talking about.
Yeah. And Rick, I love Rick. He's a buddy. He's a good friend, but we're going to open up MDMA to everybody in the chemical this, and it'll never be a profit, and then Lycos and a for-profit. And I mean, I knew it was like Joe Biden saying I'd never pardon Hunter. As soon as those words came out of his mouth, I'm like, that's clearly what he's going to do. It was the same thing with MDMA. When Rick Doblin's like, we will never do a profit. Breaking news, it's a for-profit. I'm like, okay, So we should have led with the plants. We should not have led with MDMA. But the fact that we did means we have some great lessons learned that we're not going to do with the plants. I think also the FDA not approving MDMA for therapeutic use puts them on notice, because there was a big mushroom cloud after that. Like, oh, let's look, you used to work for Pfizer, and
that also turned the lights on in the FDA kitchen. So now they got to tighten shit up, right? Now there's a new sheriff in town. So, all right, you said no to MDMA for these reasons. The next thing that comes up that has everything, suitcase with a bow on top, it's getting approved. So we're on notice. So in the next 4 years, I think we're good. If you ask me, what my ultimate vision is to not be doing this. I tell people when I started this foundation, I said the mission of this foundation, besides ending veteran suicide, is to go away. You should not have veteran nonprofits doing this. Veterans shouldn't be taking care of this. You made a promise to us, right? And I don't even want to get on this bad tangent, but there's a lot of shit in the veteran nonprofit community. I run my own financial company. I did well on Wall Street. I don't get paid from the foundation. My wife doesn't get paid. Be wary of veteran foundations whose founders make a shitload of money from their foundation. It makes my skin crawl.
There is a reason why we're talking, and that you were someone I reached out to as opposed to some of the other ones out there. I've seen it personally. I've seen them try to weaponize the story, and put a narrative in with some of our own experiences. Yes, exactly. I've seen some stuff out there and that'll make your skin crawl. And it's just like, that should not be.
Well, at the end of the day, truth is truth, right? So,
exactly.
there ain't no truth is truth.
No, that was actually one of the things when we formulated some stuff and we were talking about, with a group of us and everything. And it was like there's no reason to do anything other than tell the truth, guys. And they all
gonna come out anyway, man.
They're like, you're right. There's no reason to change anything. There's no reason to build a narrative in. Like, just tell the truth.
Correct. And people see it. To your point, it's seen, which is even worse, right? And that was one of the toughest things when I was integrating with this medicine. I was a new life and yay, and to go into the space and to start seeing shit. I'm like, wait a minute. In a community of healing where there's not supposed to be any egos, or we're supposed to be able to be, in a fighter squadron, man, in a debrief. Yeah. If you were a fly on the wall, you'd think we hated each other. We don't. We love each other, but we are brutally honest with each other.
Yep.
Because first of all, we don't want to die, and second of all, I don't want you to kill me. We are brutal with each other behind closed doors. So when we open up the doors, we're best friends, and we can be even more lethal. So in the veteran community, I'm like, what the fuck is going on in here? My ego got destroyed. Did you guys take reverse medicine? That was like an ego boost. So it's all good. I mean, I truly do love all of those folks, but we're focusing on the mission. Every penny that we can throw over Susie and my wife and I have been funding our foundation for a long time, but that doesn't scale. I mean, I'm not Donald Trump here. So, our biggest limitation actually is funding, right? Yeah. I mean, it's like I said, if the VA had thrown that 1.5 to us, that's half our list, easily cured. So I tell my wife, I'm fucking awesome at everything except asking people for money, man. Running a nonprofit sucks because I thought people would be glad to donate to heal veterans. Plus, as you know, for the past 4 years, despite what the media was telling us or the past administration about how everything was great, it wasn't. Inflation raging and wages are it's been a very tough environment to raise money. So that's why, Oregon and Colorado being able to do a retreat for $2,500 instead of $6,500 is a godsend for us. And there's even a great, he was a Navy senior chief, a corpsman, with the Marine Corps too, who owns a place in Oklahoma called Rising Ridge, Gerard Napier. And he, you should definitely talk to him. He's just an incredible human being. And I think his retreats, we budget $1,000 or maybe $1,500. So thankfully, because, at the end of the day, like we talked about, healing's free. Yeah. Healing is free, folks, but the retreat center's got to pay a mortgage. The facilitators who are trained, they don't work for free. The chef that makes the food on the retreat. So there are there is overhead. I'd love to get it to, I'd love to have the No Fallen Heroes Aspen Institute of Healing in the mountains where everything is free would be my ultimate goal here. But the fact that, the price of these things are coming down makes my heart smile. I mean, there were, there's like 5-star clinics in, Jamaica and Costa Rica and Mexico for like 15 grand or 20 grand type of shit. And us veterans are over here sleeping in sleeping bags on a retreat for $1,200. So,
well,
you got to do what you got to do, right?
The celebrity end of things. Right now, it's a bit of a novel thing, and I'm not saying that their trauma and everything else is any less important, but there is, again, that's a market for it, and when there's money to be made, people take advantage.
Yeah.
It's good to hear that. That's not, and again, that's why we're talking. I could tell very easily from the very start, in finding your organization and then going through everything and looking through, do my own research on that end. It's pretty easy to tell where your guys' hearts are. And,
I appreciate that, man.
Again, that's why I wanted to talk to you.
Yeah, I learned this doing the medicine. If you lead with your heart and your truth, it's impossible you can't.
Yeah.
If you lead with truth and your heart, that's a win, man. Wherever that takes you, that is exactly where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So, Whiz, where can people find you, your organization, and get some more information in their hands to kind of maybe start looking at their own journey?
Yeah, like we talked about earlier, Google a veteran's guide to psychedelics or whatever it's called. It's on psychedelics.com. But go to nofallenheroes.com. Up at the top right, where over at Contact Us, there's a drop down that says Grant Request or Intake Form or something like that. Just start the process there if you're interested in a healing grant. If you can do a partial grant, and again, I hate talking like this, I have to though. If you can do a partial grant, you kind of move up the list a little bit. If you can do a full grant, we can get you going pretty quickly. We just got to do your coaching and stuff like that. So if you can self-fund, you can get going pretty quick. If you need a 100% grant, we do have a waiting list. It's just, that's just the way things are. You can follow me on Instagram, official Whiz Buckley. And then, our YouTube channel, No Fallen Heroes, has got some great content on there, man. From, SEALs to F-14 Tomcat guys and gals doing the medicine, all different medicines. We got people who debrief their ayahuasca, toad, psilocybin, firefighters, Leos. Check out that's where I point people. I'm like, if you want to start really super getting up to speed, the No Fallen Heroes YouTube channel is pretty good. And if you're up for episode 7 of my Max Afterburner podcast, it wasn't a video one. It was before I started doing the video stuff back in the day. On Apple Podcast or Spotify, episode 7 is the first Ibogaine and Toad experience. It's I'll re-listen to that every couple of months. I'm like, oh my, I still can't believe any of that happened, or that's even me that happened to. But it resets me a little bit. But yeah, man, nofallenheroes.com, and then Instagram and YouTube is kind of where we are. And as we talked about earlier, one more time, I'll laugh and I'll say this: the medicine calls to you. If this felt like a complete waste of time, it's not calling to you. Or yet, right? Maybe a couple of years down the road, you're like, I remember those two guys talking about that. If you stayed to this moment, you're like, it's calling to you. I promise you. And I'll leave you with this. I used to think people who wrote in journals were weird. I'm a journal writer now, because when you start your medicine work, you really should start writing stuff down, because you'll be able to see your transition. But I want to share this with you. And almost everybody I've worked with in the medicine space says the same thing. The second you say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I want to heal, or I want to, I think I want to sit with this medicine. The universe, again, whatever word you want to choose, heard that. Mm-hmm. And things start shifting. Things start aligning. And I, even to this day, if I'm going to knock the ice off the wings or the rust off, same thing happens. Like, you know what? I'm going to do that. I can see it. And I can feel things that actually start to change. The universe starts shifting and maneuvering things to make that happen. Because this universe and God really, he put us here for this brief little moment experience here. Anybody who's wanting to be a better man, woman, husband, father, who just wants to be better for themselves, you're going to make this entire world a better place. If you put the mask on yourself first, man, that I'm telling you, and again, I sound like the parties of flip guy. I'm the 60s Malabead wearing drug rug hippie. It's the truth. We will not see wars. We will see a lot less hate. I actually said this on a podcast recently, one of my podcasts. I probably would have volunteered to go work at the Florida penitentiary on death row to be the guy who throws the switch. You know who needs this medicine the most? Criminals or guys going out on parole. You want to lower the rate of recidivism?
Yep.
Heal these people.
Yeah.
Dude, first of all, you served your time. Second of all, you're not a criminal, man. Let me knock that shit off you and show you who you truly are underneath that thing. I guarantee you this country would be a much better place. And for Whiz to go from I'd work on death row to we should heal criminals is, if that doesn't tell you a transition, then I can't help you. But the world would be a much better place if people chose to heal. So I appreciate you having me, man, and getting the message out.
Oh no, absolutely. I mean, that's oh my gosh, that's everything on why this thing was started, and that's so Max Afterburner, No Fallen Heroes, Whiz Buckley. Man, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing that knowledge and spreading that, because I mean, really, and this is one of the other things too. You said maybe the medicine isn't calling you yet, and then all of a sudden there's that trigger where they're like, man, those two guys that we're talking about. And it's funny because I'll go back, and even in researching for this episode, I went back and I was listening to some ones that I had listened to before. But now that you've heard, seen, experienced things, you go back and then it's almost like fresh eyes on it. And you're like, oh my God, that's what was being said in there, or now I get it. So yes. It's really cool. And thank you for coming on though and enlightening and spreading this to the audience. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, Will. Thank you, my brother. God bless, and thanks for everything you're doing to put the ladder down to help our brothers and sisters out. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Wiz. Hey, hang tight just for a minute because I want to talk to you afterwards. But for the rest of you guys, put out some other things, and we'll be right back. This has been another episode of Veteran Success Story. Thanks for joining us, as we hope we can inspire and inform other veterans within the veteran community of things that are out there available to them, in the way of treatment, as well as to inspire others to seek out, how they can make their own place within the veteran community in order to help others. I know follow and subscribe for more, as I have a lot of other guests coming on. But if you want to know more about No Fallen Heroes and some of the treatments that are out there, I'm going to put the link to the No Fallen Heroes Foundation within the description below. You can go in there, you can basically get to anything you need to know, and Matthew's been sure to put in some other stuff. But one of the other things he handed to me was, and again, I'll link it in the descriptions, is a psychedelic treatment guide for veterans. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that and to start there if you've been interested in anything involving plant medicine, therapy, or you're just the therapies at the VA are just not cutting it. They're not working for what you need. This might be something you want to look into. So it's not easy. There's a lot more involved than a lot of people think. It's not just go off into the jungle to experience the mothership. This is something completely different, but it is life-altering. It is life-changing. And anyone that I know that I've seen that has gone through this therapy, that I've known, I've talked to, I know there was a few of the guys that had been on the deployment that I was on that have sought it out and have done the treatments, and night and day difference for them. They've said that it's done a lot, and they attribute a lot of what's going on in their life to that particular experience and that therapy and that treatment. So I'm encouraging others to look into it. I know that we talked offline afterwards about the possibility of being involved in one of those in order to deep dive, with some of the guys into this. But I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope you got something from it. Again, check out No Fallen Heroes Foundation. Matt also has another podcast, the Max Afterburner podcast, which there's a multitude of different things on there. I will never not promote other people's podcasts, books, any of this information out there. We're a community and we are much stronger together. This isn't a competition. This is about collaboration and about, forming that unit and that support that we had within service. So thank you for joining. Like and subscribe, follow across the board. We're on social. You can look into that. I'm sure you already know, but also the Foundation as well. So thank you for listening. This has been yet another episode of Veteran Success Story.